Good morning and welcome to our Cyclists Love Trains event. I'm Jill Warren, the CEO of the European Cyclists Federation. We are the umbrella federation for cyclists organizations across Europe, and we promote cycling as a sustainable and healthy mode of transport and leisure. Our main activities include conducting evidence-based advocacy for more and better cycling. We do innovative research and thought leadership projects and initiatives, such as the Cyclists Love Trains report you'll hear about today. We provide tools, resources, and training to support national, regional, and local advocacy for cycling through our members and networks. We coordinate and develop the EuroVelo cycle route network, and we organize major events such as Velo City, the premier annual international cycling conference on cycling planning, which facilitates best practice sharing and knowledge and policy transfer, taking place this year in Lisbon from the 6th to the 9th of September. Here at ECF, we know that cyclists all over Europe increasingly want to be able to take their bicycles with them on trains. Last year, our Cyclists Love Trains campaign, which was aimed at influencing the recasting of the Rail Passengers' Rights and Obligations Regulation in favor of provisions for bicycle carriage on trains, had tremendous popular appeal, with engagement on all our digital channels going through the roof. No doubt, such strong public support for combined bicycle train mobility alongside our relentless lobbying and the support of key members of European Parliament like Anna Deparnay-Grunenberg, who we'll hear from very soon, helped achieve the result that new and refurbished trains will be obliged to include a minimum of 4 dedicated spaces for assembled bicycles. Obviously, we'd all like to see a higher number of dedicated spaces for bikes, but this obligation for trains to provide them when the recast regulation takes effect is a first in EU history. The European Commission declared 2021 as the European Year of Rail, an initiative that seeks to shine a light on rail as one of the most sustainable, innovative, and safest transport modes. With our Cyclists Love Trains report, ECF in turn seeks to shine a light on the current bike friendliness of railway operators in Europe. This extensive piece of research, which my ECF colleagues Fabian Küster and Charles Carnegie will present shortly, can be used by policymakers and industry leaders alike to benchmark their performance, study examples of shortcomings and best practices, and understand where the potential for improvement is. A lot of work has gone into this report, and I would like to thank and congratulate my colleagues for a job well done. I hope you enjoy today's event, which will be moderated by Laura Laker. Laura is a journalist, Guardian contributor, and the host of Streets Ahead, a mobility podcast. Laura, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jill. And it's great to be here today. As someone who tries not to fly, I've taken bikes on trains across Europe in various guises. I've put them in boxes, I've put them in bags, I've put gaffer tape around my wheels, and I've taken bike whole. So this is a topic that's very close to my heart, as it will be to many people who cycle. And of course, this year is the European Year of Rail, which means there's a greater focus on train travel. But it's not just about people who are keen to cycle on holiday or to cycle for everyday journeys. It's about making it easier for people to take bikes on trains or to combine bike and train travel, whether they're keen cyclists or not. So we have an action-packed hour or so. We'll see the launch of the ECF report, as Jill mentioned, and we have a panel discussion as well as remarks from some fantastic guests. So here, first of all, to introduce the topic is Anna Deparnay-Grunenberg. So welcome, Anna. You were not only the European Parliament's rapporteur on the European Year of Rail report, but also as an MEP, you were shadow for the Green Party on the Rail Passengers' Rights Regulations. This is the regulation that mandated 4 dedicated spaces on all new trains by 2025 in Europe. So I'm told that you fought hard for provision for cycles in that regulation. Could you just tell us quickly about the ecosystem of bikes and trains, how that looks for you going forward, and why it matters?
Thank you, Laura, and thank you very much for the invitation and to having me here today. Yes, at the first I have to say we had to fight really hard to have a better service for cyclists into the regulation on passenger rights in the European Parliament. There was undoubtedly a great deal of resistance. But in the end, we could convince that bikes and trains are a really perfect match for sustainable tourism, for greener mobility of the future. And yeah, you're asking me for the ecosystem of combining bikes and train, ideally, how it looks for me. Maybe I can just take you on a little journey in the future to have this vision really clear. So imagine maybe it is September 2031. So in 10 years, just come with me on this journey in the future. And the VeloCity takes place again in Lisbon in 10 years. I'm sitting in the train, looking at the landscapes, and I have kind of this small aware moment of being really in connection, you know, that maybe offline in the train, taking really sense that you are traveling and you're enjoying it and not just working all the time, what is the perfect place in the train. So I can remember I have 2021 when the VeloCity already took place there in Lisbon, and it was the end of this difficult pandemic. We really enjoyed the socializing and the visionary context of those times. We had to old world. We spoke always on reducing CO2. We had targets we thought we never could reach, but we met in Lisbon in 2021. And I now, 10 years later, invited to speak in the 10th anniversary on the report on bicycle carriage, which has been published annually since 2021. And the progress since then has been phenomenal. Therefore, I decided to travel myself by my preferred method, by bike and train, by e-bike and train, because I'm not so young anymore, and in 10 years, not so young anymore. I did not know if it would be easier to rent an e-bike at the mobility hub arriving at Lisbon, or if I should take my own with me in the beginning. But the station in Paris, I thought it would be easier in this really beautiful bike city of Paris. And I had a look in the international mobility application, and I could see on the train to Paris and also on the night train to Lisbon, that would be enough space for my e-bike. And so I decided to take it with me. And booking was also smooth through the application. With one click, I got all my reservation for my bicycle and for the world journey. And the board restaurant, I met a lot of people also coming to the VeloCity conference. We had a really interesting discussion about health and mobility, about the big changes that had been occurred in the last decade. And since it's now easy to ride off and on the trains, also with the luggage, and as they have this clear designated space for my bicycle, it's a real pleasure to travel like that. Even on the TGV from Stuttgart to Paris, we no need to dismantle the bike anymore, a real progress. And the carriage for bicycle was well indicated at the platform and in the application. So now I'm waiting for the night train from Paris to Lisbon in this journey in the future. I am so glad to have my e-bike with me for the hills of Lisbon, and it will be ready as I can charge it on the night train, because I can really have a space to charge it in each train I'm taking with. So back to today from this journey, and back to today in the year of rail 2021. At the end, hopefully, of this first worldwide pandemic, we're speaking today how we can make all this progress. I'm very curious to hear about the report. So we will hear now to see where we stand now in Europe, and how many trains is it possible today, in how many countries, and how will be the progress in the next year. So really pleased to hear Fabian and to present the report. And I hope you enjoyed this little journey with me to set the scene.
Thank you, Anna, for taking us on that journey into the future. And it's certainly a journey that I would like to go on as well. So now to the present and to the big report that the ECF's been working on. I know a lot of hard work's gone into this. We have Fabian Kuster, who is the ECF Advocacy Director, and we have Charles Carnegie, who's the ECF Policy Intern. and they're going to present the report now, Cyclists Love Trains.
Well, thank you, Laura, for your kind words of introduction. Well, warm welcome also from my side. And thank you, Anna, for putting out the challenge to make this report an annual report. Let's see about that one. I believe many of us have their own personal stories of combining bike and train journeys. Hopefully, mainly positive ones, but perhaps also negative ones. The time that you waited in suspense on the platform, not knowing whether there would still be space to get your bike on board. Or you had wished to have exercised more in the gym because you had to lift your bike up the stairs. Or when you had to run from one end of the platform to the other one in order to access the coach with the bike space. But beyond personal experience, there's undoubtedly a different level of service from the various rail companies. In total, ECF has identified 69 rail companies and services from across the EU and beyond, and compared, contrasted, and scored their bike friendliness. Our report will show some try hard, but many have to try harder. Next slide, please. Yeah. Our main focus is on the long distance, national, and international type of trains. This is where most improvements need to be done. We also take non-foldable and complete bicycles into account. The recent revised EU passengers' rights and obligations regulation applies to bicycles that can be readily ridden. So bicycles that need to be partially dismantled and put in bags or boxes following the provisions relating to luggage. For comparing and scoring the rail operators, we developed 6 indicators. We operate off the premise, the more flexibility for the user, the better. My colleague, Charles Carnegie, the author of this report, and whom I want to thank and congratulate for doing such a great job, will take you through the indicators and the results in a minute. Perhaps you will notice that these indicators do not describe the whole ecosystem of combining bike and train journeys. We did neither include bike parking facilities at railway stations, nor the quality of the bike spaces on the rolling stock, nor how helpful train conductors are in general in making your train experience an enjoyable one. We focused on what ECF had access to data to across the field, could compare and score. And with that, I hand over to you, Charles.
Thank you, Fabian. And thank you for setting the scene in terms of talking about the indicators and how we divided them. So we really wanted to come up with a system of how to compare and contrast the different operators and companies across Europe. And so we had to come up with sort of different key ways to do that. And in the end, we sort of set upon this idea of scoring the hardware and then scoring the so-called software. So the hardware is, actually how many spaces are there on the train, and also are there bicycle hire schemes at the end destination, just to help just within that framework of multimodality and modal shift. So that's sort of the more physical infrastructure side, and that got weighted a little bit more because it takes a little bit more investment and time on the part of the companies and services to be able to implement that type of thing. But then what's also important is what we call the software side of things, which is sort of how is bicycle carriage enabled, so to speak. So how much is the tickets going to cost? How much do the reservations cost? Where can you buy tickets? And at how many places can you buy tickets? When you go online to find out about the information of the bicycle carriage, how many languages is it available in? Because if you're traveling around Europe, we have so many different languages, which is wonderful. But if there's just in the native language of one particular country, then for many people it can be quite tricky. And if Europe wants to be a top tourist destination, then it's important that this is tended to. And again, how functional is the website? Where is the information? Is the information about bicycle carriage for international trains on one page, and then for domestic trains on another? Is there information about non-standard bicycles? And is there a little tool in the search tool in your journey planner to find out which trains you can and can't take your bike on? So if we could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So I think a great way to visualize this is by taking a look at sort of one company in particular. So here we got the Czech Railways. They ranked 9th overall in our ranking, and I think it's good that I think it's good that we shine a light on sort of a central European operator that's also sort of, I think, making moves in terms of bicycle carriage. And what we can see is we can do a little bit more of a breakdown of the indicators. So 14 points. So we have a total points for everything is out of 50. Bicycle spaces, it can be up to 20 points. So 14 points means that there's 7 spaces available. 6 points for the bicycle hire. That means that they have 50 to 75 locations across the Czechia to hire a bicycle from the Czech Railway Company. Costs, unfortunately, the Czech Railways in this indicator didn't do particularly well. When we were doing costs and trying to figure out how we score different people, I took the idea that we have to score them on the worst case scenario, unfortunately. So this means that the most expensive opportunity to take your bike it will be above 15 euros, but below 20 euros. Booking channels, there's 3, so you can do it on the online, on the app, and then also at a ticket desk. The languages, they have 3 languages, so there's 2 points for that. So German, Czech, and English. And the functionality, unfortunately, the Czech Railways at the moment don't have that sort of little tool on their website to show you which trains you can and can't take your bike. So overall, they're doing really quite well. 9th is not too bad at all, but definitely room for improvement. If we could go to the next slide. So just before we talk about sort of some of the overall winners and losers, so to speak, of the report, I thought it would just be a great way to visualize that, visualize where you can and can't take your bike on mainland trains across Europe. And what you can see is certainly in Central, Eastern, Western Europe, that main big map there in the top right-hand corner, it's quite possible. However, Spain, if you look a bit below, Spain is a bit tricky. And then also Sweden, unfortunately, is a bit tricky with only one operator allowing non-foldable bikes on their trains. So if we could go to the next slide. So what we have here is the final top 6 of our scoring. Well, as you can see, they come sort of from Central Europe in general, Central and Western Europe. And we have a joint venture undertaking which travels between Germany and the Netherlands, between the NS and the DB, and they rank the top. That's followed by the SNCB, NMBS, and the SBB, followed by the Mavstart in Hungary, and followed by Deutsche Bahn and Westbahn in Austria. So these are really the top performers. And so we can go to the next slide so we can contrast the top performers. Now, these are the ones which is really tricky. These people scored, or these companies scored 0% because they do not allow non-foldable, undismantled bikes on their trains. And what you'll also see is that these are typically international services, high speed, cross-border. So high-speed cross-border. So this is really where room for improvement can be made to really enhance the bicycle carrying passengers' experience of traveling around Europe. So if we could go to the next slide, please. So, and if we just take a little bit of a further breakdown of results. So what we have is that 22% of all of the companies that we examined do not accept bicycles whatsoever. So it's not great. When it comes to bicycle spaces, 12 companies only score 1 point. 2 points, it should be. So that's also not great, but it does show that many other companies are doing better. Bicycle hire, only 9 companies managed to score points. So that's really, again, somewhere that companies should make a little bit more effort, perhaps, or take a bit more of an interest in that type of that side of things. When we look at cost, it's great news that 22 companies, it's free. That's really great news. When it comes to booking channels, 11 companies only offer 1 booking channel. Websites, unfortunately, 41% of companies scored 0 points. So that's really, again, somewhere that could be looked into. And that's quite an easy win. easy win to change the website languages, much more so than investing in bicycle spaces and the actual physical infrastructure, which takes much longer. And then the website functionality, 23 companies only offer the bike connection search tool in their online journey planners. So that's again something, maybe perhaps another easy win there to boost the overall scores of the different companies. So we just go to the next slide, please. So what did we conclude about taking a bicycle on a train in Europe? And the unfortunate thing is that it's quite a disjointed European rail infrastructure ecosystem. And the disjointed nature of the infrastructure is emblematic of the complex and often confusing rules and regulations concerning bicycle carriage. And so that's something that really needs to be taken into account, that having a little bit more streamlined rules, making it easier for the passenger and providing the infrastructure, you know, build it and they will come. And I think we can be certain of that. And we go to the next slide. And so what do we recommend? We recommend that all rail companies accept bicycles, be they high-speed cross-border, and we would like them to take an interest in the bicycle sharing schemes at the stations. We would like cost-effective tickets to make it easy for people to go on to take the train with their bicycles, many different places where they can book, and also, again, clear and concise information. So that's sort of our main recommendations, and I hope that you have read the report and you find it interesting. And if we go to the next slide, yeah, thank you for taking your time to listen to that, and we hope that there's a positive future for bikes on trains.
Thank you so much, and yeah, really important work, I think, and really highlights how variable the services across Europe and where different providers can do better. So now we have with us Isabel Garsel, who is Head of Business Performance and Development at Deutsche Bahn Connect, talking through the general strategy of Deutsche Bahn, connectivity and intermodality. So over to you, Isabella.
Thanks very much, Laura, and thanks again to Fabian and Charles for the interesting insights based on the extensive report that you have created. I think, as Jill Warren had already said at the beginning, it's not just only an interesting benchmarking tool or benchmarking base. At the same time, I think it's a great source of inspiration of all railway companies, regardless at which rank they ended up, or regardless where they ranked, because there were so many aspects that had been analyzed that can bring us new ideas of what we can implement in order to improve the rail and bike combination on a short-term but also longer-term perspective. I'm very pleased to share some thoughts with you within the next minutes regarding Deutsche Bahn's strategy of rail and bike. Let me start with the overarching DB strategy, and this is called Strong Rail. And we are convinced that a strong railway system is very much important for the climate, but also for the people. Why so for the climate? Let's take a look to the German landscape. In Germany, traffic represents the highest cause of greenhouse gas emissions, roughly 20%, and also the second highest cause of particulate matter emissions. So we are convinced that a strong rail, and of course, when we talk about a connection or mobility, it's not just point-to-point connections, but we need an end-to-end view on mobility offerings, because a private car always provides end-to-end mobility for its users. And this is where we have to go to. How does the bike, which role does the bike play? Well, among all the alternative of first and last mile connections from a station or from a railway station to the particular goal of your journey, the bike is the most environmental friendly means of transport. So we are convinced within Deutsche Bahn that rail and bike go very well together. And we are also convinced that a strong rail is not enough, because we need to provide alternatives that are comfortable so that people would refrain from using their own car and own car ownership. And this is why we need to come up with new alternative solutions. So how can we make this strong rail strategy come in place? How can we make it work? We defined 15 building blocks Out of those 15 building blocks, 3 are most important when it comes to the combination of rail and bike. The first one is called new mobility offerings. So all kinds of last mile mobility services, from bike sharing to micro scooters, car sharing and so forth. The second building block is called smart services. Here we focus on digitization and automation of our offerings, but also on enabling self-services to customers from different perspectives. And the third important building block when it comes to a combination, a smooth combination of rail and bike, and this is what also the report has shown, that it's very often quite difficult to access information regarding bike offerings or bike carriage offerings. So we are convinced that digital platforms, integrated digital platforms, are super important, so that the customer first finds out what is there, what kind of services already exist, and how can they book and access those services. So let me continue with which role DB Connect, the company I represent, is playing in that DB strategy. DB Connect is a 100% subsidiary of Deutsche Bahn, and besides other responsibilities, we are Deutsche Bahn's bike sharing provider. So we are providing bike sharing systems to different bike sharing services to different customers, be it cities and municipalities. This is when it comes to so-called public bike sharing systems or schemes. We furthermore provide bike sharing solutions to corporations, so in a B2B setup, and finally, last but not least, to consumers, be it rail users or be it consumers who need or who use bikes or our sharing bikes for their day-to-day mobility needs. We are present in 80 cities with 16,000 bikes, and we have roughly 1 million registered customers. However, this is the status quo. And this is, of course, not everything we need to do in order to provide great services in the future. And as the report has shown, we are ranking number 5. So there's room to grow, to increase our services. And what I think is very important, and I'm not aware of how the other bike sharing companies are organized from how the other rail companies are organizing their bike sharing services. But in the case of Deutsche Bahn, it's quite interesting because there is different players that put together this kind of ecosystem. So there is our corporate DB Corporation. Then we have the long and regional distance service operators. We have DB Connect, who is providing the bike sharing offerings at our stations and in cities. And then we also have colleagues from DB Station and Service, so the ones that are responsible for the stations and for all the stationary infrastructure for, be it bike parking slots, be it bike service centers, and so forth. So we have different players within the DB universe who have to collaborate to make the overall strategy work and to improve the services. So what I would like to say is, I think we need to better integrate all the activities that are currently happening in different DB companies in order to even get a higher rank in the future, in your future reports, but in the short term to provide better and more convincing services to our customers. And I think this ecosystem of rail and bike, at least when I look at Germany, is just about evolving. And I'm very pleased for all the insights and for all the impulses we have received from that interesting study. And as a next step, I would like to build up a project team that is getting in touch with the high performers of the benchmarking study in order to understand better what they do and how they do it and how they organize those services, in order to learn and in order to copy the best practices and make them happen also in Germany. That's it from my side. Thanks very much. And I'm now very much looking forward to the panel, where also a colleague of mine will be participating.
Thank you so much, Isabella. And I think you summarised the report quite nicely. It's benchmarking and inspiration, and now it's about the next steps and how rail companies and also member states and institutions can move forward. So With me for this panel discussion, we have 5 people. We have Denis Brachet, who is Intermodality Manager at SNCB NMBS. We have Lisbeth Bloom, who is Senior Manager of Product Innovation at Deutsche Bahn Regio in Germany. We have Thierry Ducrest, Interministerial Coordinator for the Development of Bicycle Use at the Ministry of the Ecological Transition in France, which is a very long name. We can also call him Monsieur Velo, I'm told. We have Janos Foldiak, Head of Service Development at Mavstart in Hungary. And we have Zornitsa Dimitrova, who is Legal Officer at the Social Aspects, Passenger Rights and Equal Opportunities Unit of the European Commission DG Move. So welcome everyone to this panel discussion. A lot of inspiration, I think, in this report and in terms of the potential for cycle rail travel across Europe. Wanted to start quickly by quick fire round, just asking you if there were any surprises in the report, if there's anything that's particularly inspiring for you. Maybe I'll start, the names I have on my list. I have Denis Brachet first. Would you like to start?
Hello, good morning, everyone. Yeah, thank you for the question. I think it's a very interesting report. So I represent the SNCB NMBS, and actually we were extremely surprised and quite proud to with our own results, let's say. And there are some points that indeed we need to improve and that have been clearly identified, but we were ourselves quite surprised. So to end up with this score, we have started ourselves a bike train strategy this year. Actually, due to the pandemic, we have seen a lot of really a surge in terms of bike on our trains, and we felt the urge to accompany this development and improve our services around that. But we were surprised to see that our services are already quite good and in comparison with other operators.
Yes. So I think maybe I'll just go straight into a question for you, Denis, as we're talking. I might just roll that question into the next part. We know that there's been a downward trend of bicycle carriage on trains and bicycle train usage across Europe. Does it seem to you that that trend is reversing? As you said, your company has changed its policy and is improving provision. Do you see that happening more broadly? And if so, why is that? What's driving it?
Well, actually, it's not entirely correct. Actually, we have the last 10 years, we have a continuous growth in terms of usage of bike on trains in Belgium. Because I'm talking only about national traffic in Belgium. So it has been always a very popular product, let's say, within SNCB with our clients. And we see that every year it's getting more popular with the popularity of cycling growing also in a wider range. We see a lot of development also outside the SNCB, like bike tourism and also cycling to work and so on. We have we see this everywhere, and not only bike on train, but also in our bike parkings at stations. These are very full. We have continuously increased capacity, and we see that it is a challenge to follow actually the demand in terms of cycling to the station, parking your bike, and as well as people taking actually their bike on the train. And we see exactly the same trends with our partners like shared bikes. They have a continuous increase. They are also increasing their range and increasing number of service stations. And they also observe this huge growth. So I must correct on this. Maybe it's a bit different. And what we actually see now is that there is an acceleration as well with the pandemic. And actually we have as a railway operator, this has been quite a difficult time. This pandemic, we have lost a lot of ridership, but cycling is actually one of the only growing product that we have. So we have a leisure public that is going on holiday in Belgium as well and taking that train, and this leisure public is growing, and we have to cater for them. And we feel that if we want also to gain again ridership, we have to use and encourage this public as well, this leisure public that is actually the growth market. We see in the commuter market that there is a a kind of drop in terms of usage, and it is not true. We see more and more telework and so on. So this market will probably not entirely reestablish like the previous situation before the pandemic. So leisure is actually becoming more and more important for us, and bike on train is one of these leisure products that we find important to sustain, to support.
Thank you, Denny. And my next question for Elizabeth Bloom. The report is titled "Cyclists Love Trains," and it sometimes I know from personal experience, it sometimes feels like that enthusiasm is not a two-way street. That it can be quite hard to take your bike on a train, and it can feel quite. And I wonder if what your thoughts are on that. If train companies have a sort of ambivalent view towards cycling, or if, like Denny said, the pandemic has changed that view, or this long-term trend of upward usage of cycles on trains has changed it, and if there's not a sort of emotional connection, if there's perhaps a business case or an environmental case for better provision.
Yes, first of all, thank you so much for having me. Like you said, it's an environmental case for us, and a really passionate environmental case for us. Isabella just said it perfectly. We're, as Deutsche Bahn, are really focusing on shifting traffic away from the streets, from the car, and towards rail. And we need strong partners within that. We do have strong partners within the DB, but also the customers, cyclists, anybody who travels eco-friendly is our friend, but a strong partner. But of course, like any good relationships, there is love and there's challenges. So yeah, I can confirm, of course, there comes challenges. We have a trade-off between, we have cyclists and we want to be able to carry to their needs, but we also have other customers. We have to look at capacity. How are we using capacity in a very intelligent, innovative, creative way, so we can serve the needs of other customers as well. We also have to look at how can we improve the information we're giving to cyclists in order to have a great journey from start to end, like from planning till getting to where they want to go. So those are the challenges we're facing right now, but I'm the project lead for the entire bike topic at Deutsche Bahn right now. So we're definitely looking into that and improving our services.
Thank you. Were there any surprises in the report for you? Good or bad?
Well, first of all, I was really happy to see that the measurements we're putting in place are already working, so that we're under the top performers. That's great. But Isabella said it as well, there's room for growth. What I was surprised about, and what I've already taken to my colleagues, is that, the language settings on our websites is not that well established. So that's really something, especially looking beyond borders and in the European environment, that we need to improve on, and maybe that gets us a higher ranking as well, because that's an easy thing to do, I think.
Thank you. And my next question for János, in Hungary and in many other European countries last summer, there's a huge growth in people cycling, and so a huge growth in people wanting to take their bikes on the trains. And one of the top spots were the lakes, and Lake Balaton. I read that cycling increased there 185% last year on 2019, and Mavstart trains managed to cope with demands, I was told. And I wondered what lessons you can share from that success, and what perhaps you can learn from your peers. Unmute yourself.
Sorry. Thank you very much. First, I would like to answer for one of the previous questions. The report was, first of all, very surprising for us that we are ranking that good. And I think it was very important to motivate my company because we are working a lot in transporting bicycles. We are facing a lot of very serious capacity issues. Luckily, we are managing to solve them. But you know, to know that actually we are good at it compared to other countries and other companies is very motivating. So thank you very much for that. Yes, Lake Balaton is one of the most important destination in Hungary, and because after the pandemic or in last summer, people couldn't really travel abroad. People try to find something good and something interesting in Hungary, and that was cycling. So in tourism, the passenger numbers to Lake Balaton were grown by 36% to previous year, and in previous year we also had a lot of bicycles. We use, so the capacity is the main issue, because everyone wanna travel in the morning from Budapest to Lake Balaton. And yeah, there is a train at 8 o'clock in the morning from main station of Budapest, and everybody just wanna take that train. And before that, we had the bicycle ticket, which was for the whole region. You could travel with one ticket in every train and carry the bicycle with you for free. So it was a cheap product. And now we just cannot use that ticket anymore. So we had to have reservation for all the trains, because then 200 passengers will arrive for the ideal time in the peak hour. So we are facing that problem, but we on every Balaton train we have a huge capacity bicycle carriage. The whole wagon is just for bicycles, and we use, which is very useful and very good experience for the passengers. We use student workers, usually students who are learning about transportation in university. They come for the summer as a summer work to work for a company, and they have for the passengers to store the bicycles and put it on the train, because these bicycle carriages are, most of them are quite old. The platform level, between the platform level and the bicycle, there is 60 centimeters. It's just quite high if your bicycle is packed. But the student workers in that peak direction, in peak trains, in every direction in that area, the student workers can really help. And also, after a student worker helps for the passengers, cyclists love trains, because this is something very positive for them. I think that's a very good solution. We started to use workers 6 years ago, and in every year we have those students in more and more trains. And after Lake Balaton, now we are improving our services to another lake. It's called Tisza Lake in east of Hungary, and we have a tourist train which is just for bicycles. There are 2 bicycle transport carriages on that train, going in the morning and coming back in the evening to Budapest. And we are also facing a lot of bicycle passengers in at the Danube, to the north of Budapest. And there is another lake, that's Velence Lake, which is a little bit closer to Budapest. And the problem here is that we serve that lake with suburban trains, and suburban trains with electric motor units. And these electric motor units doesn't have enough space for bicycles. So in the weekend we have other trains just especially for bicycles. But when the suburban trains, I'm going every half an hour, a lot of bicycles just don't want to wait more half an hour for a bigger capacity train. This is a difficult question to solve it.
Yeah, okay. I'm going to have to move on. It sounds like maybe some of your trains have got a lot of capacity, which maybe other companies don't. So it sounds like maybe a difficult one to translate to other. But I mean, obviously, there's a lot of enthusiasm there for train use with bikes. So my next question is for Thierry. We've heard from our 3 train companies, which are among the top 6 of all the companies which were assessed by the ECF. So congratulations. Thierry, my question for you, Monsieur Velo, is that asking you about you had some new legislation in 2019 in France, and wanted to ask you what kind of tools governments have in relation to increasing bike train provision. I know France went above and beyond the European regulations of having a minimum of 4 spaces, and you went for 8 instead. What can governments do to improve provision on trains?
Yeah, well, thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Laura. And thank you for inviting me. Actually, there was a Mobility Orientation Act that was published late 2019, and that followed the announcement of a national cycling plan in 2018 by the Prime Minister. So, meaning that there is a real momentum in France to drastically change regarding bike usage, and the national cycling plan has an objective to triple the modal share from 3 to 9% in 2024. So many measures has been taken, and including bike plus train solutions that has been taken into account. And regarding bike space, effectively in January this year, a decree has been published by the French government that obliged all new trains and refurbished trains to have at least 8 bike spaces on board for undismantled bike, and that starts March 2021. So it's both more than the European legislation and before the European legislation. That has been a strong political will to develop train on board, knowing that French is not, and the French operators and main operators, SNCF, is not very well ranked at the present times, but I'm sure that the report will be inspiring to them. So that was the one main decision made by the government, and another one regards bike parking at stations. Also, another decree has obliged more than 1,000 train stations to have bike parking slots by 2024.
And were there any surprises in the report for you? Anything particularly inspiring or surprising?
No, I guess it shows the progress we have to make France, but it's also very optimistic for us, particularly regarding the bike boom that occurred in 2020, and that it was a real cultural change. It was a real drastically changing all the cultures, including SNCF, I guess. So they're really the coming years will be very enthusiastic, I guess, and very positive results in France.
Thank you. Zonitsa Dimitrova, last but not least, I wanted to ask you, obviously different countries have different measures, and we've seen how France is trying to move forward with its cycle policies and improve uptake of sustainable travel. But at the European-wide level, how does the European Commission work with train companies at a strategic level to try and improve measures for bikes on trains across Europe?
Thank you for this question, Laura. First of all, I would like to go back to one of the points already mentioned during the discussion at the beginning of the discussion. It was indeed a very difficult process to go ahead with this provision, because it was not that well understood that trains and companies would reserve spaces for bicycles and not sell these seats for passengers, where it is clear that you could make more money when selling seats for passengers than just reserving for bicycles. This is a normal business constellation. But nevertheless, in the European policy, we have now the European Green Deal, we have the Sustainable and Smart Mobility Strategy. In 2021, we would have a new initiative on urban mobility. We are very much aware of the importance of the green transport. and multimodal transport. So we invested all our efforts to achieve this, as previous participants mentioned, first ever obligation to have rail companies face their duty to have a certain number of bicycles reserved for the carriage of certain space reserved for carriage of bicycles. But this is not all. When listening to the report, I was pleased to realize that some of the problems identified at this stage have also been identified in the new rail passenger rights regulation as shortcomings which deserve an improvement, and there was indeed an improvement. Here I would like to say that, well, one of the participants said we have to achieve that all railway companies shall accept bicycles. The provision as it goes, and the regulation, the framework means that the dedicated spaces for bicycle carriage on board are obligatory for all sorts of trains, being high speed, inter-member state, cross-member state, long-distance domestic services, regional services. And even where a member state would decide to exempt a regional service from the regulation, even there this provision is so important that it will stay mandatory. You may not apply other provisions from the regulation, but this one would be mandatory. There was also mentioned another point, bicycle cyclists need clear and concise information. Indeed, one of the core passenger rights we developed and we still continue to develop is the right to information. We also heard that there was a case where a passenger was not correctly informed about the possibility how to take, under which conditions a bicycle could be taken on board. So in the end, the national enforcement body investigated the case, and there was a fine of €2,500 for the carrier who did not inform the provision, that the information was not provided in a proper way. Then another point mentioned was the languages. Well, a new momentum in the rail passenger rights regulation is that carriers, railway undertakings, should provide information about the complaint handling mechanism, at least in the languages of the country, or the official languages in singular or plural, of the country where they operate their services. We have now market opening, different carriers could enter the territory of another one. So this provision, why not? Carriers may take inspiration from this provision on complaint handling. They anyhow have to inform passengers in different languages. Why would they not inform passengers in different languages about bikes as well? And then it was also mentioned that it's important that cyclists should be able to buy their tickets for the bicycles at different spaces. A very important new provision in the rail passenger regulation reads that these days, you as a passenger, you should be able to receive real-time information on what happens. But in order that you receive real-time information, that means that ticket vendors, not only carriers, but also ticket vendors should be in the position to have real-time information and transferring it down the chain to you. There are several achievements. Of course, the bicycles, the provision on bicycles, one amongst them. Several very good and very passenger-friendly achievements in this new regulation. To start by the provision that at the beginning it was questionable. Sorry, yeah.
Sorry, yeah. I know that European Commission work is very detailed, and we're so pressed for time. I'm sorry, I don't like to cut anyone short, but we only have 8 minutes now, so we're going to do a very quick fire round. Thank you so much, Sonica, and thank you everyone for your contribution so far. I have 2 different questions, one for our 3 representatives of rail operators and one for our 2 policy people. So for our rail operators, we have the question, can bikes and trains coexist perfectly? Zornitsa mentioned this conflict between paying passengers and the cycle carriage, which I know is a universal problem. Can we resolve that, and what will it take to get to this utopia, this cycle rail utopia? I might start with Dennis.
Yes, thank you for the question. I think it's a very interesting one because we ask it ourselves all the time, and it's always about compromising between all the needs and requirements of all the users. And also the biggest challenge that we have is that trains have to be designed at a moment, and they are delivered just years afterwards. So we have to be able to anticipate a lot what will be the uses in the future. But to answer your question more precisely, I think if you have a good strategy, I think it can work. And our strategy at SNCB was really focused on commuters are encouraged more to park their bike at station and to take a folding bike in the train if they wish to, if they really wish to have a bike. And they also, for them, have the service of shared bikes at their destination. And for leisure, we will cater for them on the train. Because we really did a wide customer study, and we understood that people who like to travel for leisure, they like to have their own bikes, and it has to be their own bikes because they use their bike for their destination, to have a ride and to enjoy themselves, and a long ride of the whole day and so on. So you can't offer them really a shared bike because shared bikes are usually not adapted. So, and we will cater for these people, and luckily these people usually don't travel at peak times. And we have the chance at SNCB to have developed already a few years this concept of multifunctional carriage that is extremely flexible because we have seats, folding seats, so we can cater for at peak times, and we have a lot of space for bikes at off-peak times where all the folding seats can be folded back. And actually we don't have any restriction in terms of hours for our public. But naturally, the leisure travelers will not travel at 7 hours in the morning in the direction of the busiest in the big cities, and so on. So we don't experience so much problem. So I think if you have the right strategy, targeting the right public, you can actually manage this in a reasonable way and not requiring too much investments.
Thank you. Lisbeth, the same question for you. So how do we manage this problem, and what does it take to get to cycling utopia?
Yeah, adding on to the strategy part, I also have to say what we're doing is to take the customer into the product development process. So we, for example, have a markup train. It's called the Ideas train. And there's coming something great on June 21st. I can't disclose too much. And we're looking together with the customer what kind of solutions on the train work for you. So just like Denise said, we look at foldable chairs, etc., to just make the best of the capacity we have, and we take the feedback from the different customer groups so we can implement that as well.
Great, thank you, Elizabeth. And so the same question for János.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think the main point is to design the vehicles perfectly for transporting bicycles. That's the main point, and to offer enough space for bicycles. And that's very difficult. Because it's very difficult to estimate that how many bicycle passengers we will have in 10 years. We can do that, of course, but for example, what happened after pandemic, nobody could have estimated before. So we have to be a little bit more flexible with that. Very important to offer enough space in the trains for bicycles. All the other solutions, how we can store the bicycles on the trains are quite well designed. The problem is more about the capacity, that how we can offer enough capacity on a train. We have a new solution we haven't tried yet because the trains are new and this equipment was not installed yet. But on our new suburban double-decker units, we have removable seats. So without removing these seats, there are 12 bicycle space on a train for 600 passengers. It's a huge capacity suburban unit. And when we remove those seats, then we will increase the capacity for 36. So we will use these trains in a way that in the winter time, when it's not peak for bicycles, but peak for school students, and then we use only with 12 capacity, and then with 36 bicycle capacity. And I think that's something good, because then we don't we will have enough seats for passengers as Denis said, it's a different time. A peak is in a different time for other kind of passengers. The foldable seats were not very good solution because very often passengers just sit on that.
Yeah, I think we've all experienced that awkward conversation.
Yes,
with the bike. All right, thank you, Janos. So, moving on quickly. So we have one more question for our two panelists, Thierry and Zonitsa. We have the question of, in terms of policy and Europe-wide and country-level policy, what are the next steps for improving cycle train connections for you? I'll start with Thierry.
Well, now after having published laws and decrees, now it's time for implementation actually in France. Regarding high-speed trains, for example, SNCF has ordered a new tens of new trains years ago, and actually it wouldn't be the decree I mentioned doesn't apply to this order, but SNCF decided to apply it anyhow, and at least 6 spaces per coaches and per train, and they're now trying harder to put more. So things are really now under implementations, and the last figures on bike tourism is really exploding in France. So I'm sure that lots of things will happen in the coming years.
Thank you. And the same question for Zonitsa. How do we? What are the next steps improving services across Europe for cycle train?
Well, I would say the same. At least the first point would be the same. Once you adopt legislation, then you have to see that the rules start being implemented. So in the process of implementation, we plan to engage with different stakeholders, being passenger organizations like the European Cyclists Federation and other passenger organizations, being carriers as our stakeholders as well, being national enforcement bodies who are in charge of implementing the new rules at national level. We have to see where there is need for support from our side, where there is unclarity, how we can engage in dialogue to clarify certain provisions, to take the full potential out of them, possibly to exchange best practices. We have annual meetings with the national enforcement bodies. But my last point here would be, it is very important that we also increase the knowledge, help increasing the knowledge of passengers about their rights. Because up to the point passengers do not start making use of their rights, asking for their rights, complaining about their rights, all these good achievements, as I said, we achieved recently in the course, the regulation was adopted, entered into force in June this year. All this would only stay on paper. People have to stand and to ask for their rights.
Thank you. And thank you all so much for this discussion, which has raised a lot of really interesting points, and I'm sure will be very interesting for everyone listening. We have to move on quickly. We have a closing speech from Georges Gilkenet, who is the Belgian Deputy Prime Minister and the Minister of Mobility, and he's going to talk about the EU member state perspective. So over to you, Georges.
Hello, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. It's a real pleasure for me to be here with you today for this webinar. I'm delighted to see this kind of meeting, which puts cycling and rail back at the heart of mobility policies in Belgium and throughout Europe. It's very important to share experience. It's a good way to improve ourselves. Cyclists love trains. The name of this webinar highlights the winning combination bike plus train. It's a sustainable and effective combination. This is also a strong message from the European Cyclists Federation and all its member association. Thanks for that. It's a message that was indeed heard in Belgium. As the Minister for Mobility, I'm working with our railway company to make this common ambition of a bike-friendly future reality. I'm delighted with the study carried out by ECF to create greater accessibility for cyclists on trains. The Belgian railway have managed to move up to the second place in your ranking thanks to their new train bike initiative. It's a real honor for us to be among those leading the way. We are proud to share this place with the famous Swiss railways. I would particularly like to congratulate the Belgian railways and all their staff. They have showed dynamism, innovation, and creativity in finding initial solutions adapted to cyclists quickly and at my request. They have come up with coherent action to make life easier for their passengers, including cyclists, starting this summer. This is a great achievement and the first step in the right direction. Together with the Belgian railways, we have set ourselves to the task of meeting the expectation of everyday cyclists. And our answer is clear. Trains love cyclists too. And governments also have a role to play in this. First, to build bridges between the different modes of transport and the different operators. Second, to strengthen links with neighboring countries for more accessibility for bicycle on trains, including international trains. For example, Thalys, which links Amsterdam, Cologne, Brussels, and Paris with high-speed trains, has just announced that when their trains are modernized, each train will have room for 2 bicycles. Perhaps not enough, but this is a step in the right direction. Third, to bring a common vision to the European Union together, a vision that gives the bicycle its rightful place as a mode of transport in its own right. Today, we are celebrating a first progress. It's important. It's one more step, but we will not lose sight of the work that remains to be done. It's just a beginning. We have to work for better information, better material, cheaper rates for cyclists. I have every confidence in the Belgian railways and Mr. Brachet to continue this positive development in Belgium. There are a lot of things to do for the future. I will remain committed to promoting cycling with my European colleagues in charge of mobility. A month ago, I convinced other countries, such as Denmark, to join the Benelux Bike Declaration. Countries such as Austria and Ireland have also expressed an interest to co-signing the declaration. Together, we will get cycling onto the European agenda. I'm looking forward to seeing you all soon at the Velocity conference in Lisbon, and it will be an opportunity to continue to act together. Have a great day and thanks a lot for all what you are achieving.
Thank you. And thank you so much, George, for those enthusiastic and inspiring words about Rail in Europe. Thank you. And finally, we have Henk Svarthout, who is going to make some closing remarks. Over to you, Henk.
Thank you very much, Laura, and thank you, Minister, for your kind and inspiring words. And indeed, let's hope that eventually all EU members and perhaps even beyond will join the Benelux declaration that you just promoted. Watching the debate today, I had a bit of feeling that I was watching like a mediocre romantic comedy, like a story of unrequited love, as Laura already mentioned, where, you know, the cyclists, they are deeply in love with trains, but the trains, or most of the train companies, don't really realize that they are being loved, and this is so surprising, because with a view to our climate goals, our emissions goals, the sustainability of our transport system, we are such natural allies, cyclists and trains. Trains help us cover distances that are beyond the reach of a cyclist, and cyclists and bicycles make us reach our final destination, the famous last mile, in a way that trains never could. Therefore, I think this report is helpful. It's welcome. It comes at the right time. Some of us have been saying, build it and they will come. Yes, but it has also been made clear by the rail companies that investments, in particularly in rolling material, those are long-term decisions which only will have long-term effect. But it has also been pointed out to us that there are some quick wins to be made in software, but also, for instance, in bike share schemes at stations. We at ECF are ready to work with governments, with the European institutions, with the railway companies to see whether we can get a bit more two-sided love here. I would particularly want to congratulate Intercity Berlin and the runners-up in the ranking on their achievement. They are a glowing example for the other rail companies out there. Then I would like to thank Laura for moderating this session, Charles and Fabian and the others at the office for preparing the report. If you read all of it, it's more than 100 pages. Don't read all of it. Lots of it is just rankings and numbers, but the text, the body text, is really something we should take to heart. Finally, I would like to thank our attendees, the participants in this webinar, for attending, for spending your time with you. And now I'd say let's take our love to the trains, go out on our bicycles there, take our love to the trains, and you know how many of those romantic comedies end. In the end, the two lovers get each other and they will live happily ever after. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you, Henk. That's a wonderful way to conclude, a bit of a love story, and hopefully requited love. So we've had a huge amount of interesting stuff from all of our guests today, who I'd like to thank every one of. We've talked about how the report's about benchmarking and inspiration for train companies, how we need end-to-end mobility as we do with the car, how there's been a huge number of extra cycle trips on trains during the pandemic, and we hope that that will continue. We know that there's conflict between paying passengers and cycle carriage, but there are ways around that. So strategies such as having commuters park or carry folded bikes, and leisure travellers can take their bikes on the trains. So that's one way of getting around it. Ensuring that customers are involved in product development, and also that trains are designed with cycles in mind and that there's flexible enough space. We know that we need to ensure that these new regulations are implemented and help those companies that aren't doing their best. And as George put it, we need to put rail back at the heart of mobility in Europe, and you know, bikes and trains are sustainable. Henk pointed out that this doesn't need to be an unrequited love. We have the same goals, climate goals, emissions, and cycles and trains are natural allies. So yeah, I want to thank everyone who's spoken today, and to thank you for joining us, and to remind you that you can read the report. As Henk said, it's long, but a lot of it is the tables, so it's really interesting and there's a lot of work gone into it. So that is now available online at ecf.com, and a recording of the event will be available online shortly. We hope you've enjoyed, and travel safe.